Talk about something that we've been discussing for some time now, ever since the summer, really, what's been happening with perceptions of members of our community. Specifically, Derek Chauvin's defense team has said George Floyd's size was a major factor in the use of force during his arrest. Police audio has been released, and you can hear Chauvin referencing George Floyd's size. We have some video of this in the moments that leads to his death.
We got to control this guy because he's a sizable guy. Looks like he's probably on something.
As the murder trial enters day 13, we want to take a closer look at the perception of black men, especially considering there's been a number of news stories recently that have been happening, and people have been discussing this, from George Floyd to the Army Lieutenant Caron Nazario, who filed suit following a police encounter in Virginia. And then most recently, Daunte Wright, who died when officials say an officer in Minnesota mistook her gun for her taser. In the conversations around victims of police brutality and violence, many say that there are stereotypes surrounding black men. Just the way that black men are perceived leads to a different response in how situations are handled with them compared to others. And experts say there are studies that support this as well. So we wanted to have a conversation on the topic, so we invited Dr. Aaron Smith, author and assistant professor in the Department of Africology and African American Studies at Temple University, and Dr. Charles Gallagher, the chair of the Sociology and Criminal Justice Department at LaSalle University. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Yeah. And before we start, of course, we mentioned some recent news stories, but this has been talked about, and we've seen a number of cases over the years, so certainly not a new thing. But we've noticed since 2020, more people are trying to learn and want to know more, and so we hope to do that with this segment. So, Dr. Aaron Smith, I want to start with you to get your thoughts, because there is research behind this and the way black people and black men are perceived in certain situations.
Yes, I think even more important than the research oftentimes is the generations of lived experiences of millions of African Americans that for some reason still don't seem to resonate as a consistent reality in America as much as some of the data might. So if they need data, that's fine, but if they just listen to black people for the past 400 years, I'm sure they can get a clear picture of the difference in how law enforcement engages black and brown bodies as opposed to others.
Dr. Gallagher, this is something that you're called on to speak to in cases and trials, that there is a lot of research there that people can look at a white man and a black man the exact same height, and they'll perceive the black man as a much bigger threat than the white person who's could be even smaller.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, the reality is there's the lived experience of 400 years, and there's the empirical side to it. And the simple way to understand it is a white man and a black man that are, let's say, big, they're just treated differently. That's the bottom line, is that they are perceived differently. You know, the white guy is the gentle giant, he's the avuncular uncle, big guy that would never hurt anyone. The larger black man, of course, doesn't get that benefit of the doubt. He's seen as a not just a threat, but basically a dangerous threat. And what amount of harm might he do to an officer? And this is a very old trope. I mean, it goes back to slavery, and it gets back to dehumanizing populations. And the idea is that if these people aren't civilized, if they're animalistic, they need to be controlled. And we see vestiges of that still. And everything from the white population exaggerating the size of the black population, or white people thinking young black people are older than they are and hence can be treated differently. There's a very long literature about white perceptions of the black body in America, and it's fundamentally negative.
And I want to bring up Dr. Gallagher. As we were speaking, we showed kind of a graphic that showed 3 different instances, because a lot of times when we have these cases of Daunte Wright or George Floyd, people bring up when we've had some more violent instances, because these are traffic stops of mass shootings, or you think of the Atlanta spa shooter, or you think of the Charleston shooting, the person responsible for that, the difference in how they were handled by police when they had murdered people versus how some black men in these cases are treated for traffic stops.
Right, and I think it's also about, you know, harm capability. And, you know, and I think it's important that the defense attorney, Brode, said, and this is, again, an old trope, is that, you know, that the large black men don't feel pain the same way, that they have superhuman strength. And this is absurd. There's no medical basis for what this prosecutor is saying, this defense attorney is saying. And it's one thing if someone's having a kind of drug episode and they can't feel pain because they're high, which is of course possible. That isn't unique to the Black population, but that's of course what it becomes. And what these things are fundamentally is an excuse. It's an excuse for police to use excessive force and then to use these old narratives, these stereotypes that are deeply embedded in people's minds, and then you get reasonable doubt. And that's exactly what the defense attorneys are trying to do.
And Dr. Smith, I mean, Alex brought it up right there, was that these are like traffic stops for something that I could have, like an expired tag, and then people are winding up dead. And you have cases with these mass killings. One of the other one was that horrible incident that happened down there in Florida where so many people lost their lives. Yes. And we're looking at people who are being led away in handcuffs. And that there's a lot of people for
Dylan Roof was
murders.
Given lunch. They gave Dylan Roof, they gave him a McDonald's meal after
Burger
he
King,
assassinated people in a church.
Took him to Burger King.
Burger King. Unbelievable, right? A mass murderer goes into a church and assassinates people, and they get him a lunch. Right, this is extremely different treatment.
So what do we do? I think that we heard yesterday in the trial that you brought it up, Dr. Gallagher, but I'm going to also address it to Dr. Smith right there, is that about the feeling of pain. And they were discussing, what was happening, would this cause, pain, having your knee on someone's neck right there, and that they were going back and forth. Why is this even being discussed this way?
Well, this goes back to eugenics. I'm sorry, Dr. Smith, go ahead.
No, I was thinking in terms of my students. I often hear people say they did it because I'm Black or they did it because I'm a woman. And I always tell my students, let people own their own sickness and face themselves. They did it because they're sexist. They did it because they're racist. People have a serious psychosis. I call it Euro-obliviousness, where they really just don't understand reality. And their logic does not follow any logical tests. To think that someone doesn't feel pain when your knee is on their neck with all of your weight for 9 minutes doesn't follow any medical logic, any law enforcement logic. There's a serious mental problem that racism seems to be, that we just don't want to look in the mirror as America and really face the real problem. So we talk about all these other issues and all these technical circumstantial aspects of a real mental illness that we have to address before more people die.
So how do we then, because I think that's also been the part, is people want, how do we fix this? What do we do? And the fact that this has been, a generational problem, and it doesn't seem, it's just kind of shifting, I guess, in how it manifests. How do we change this? Can we?
I was surprised that the police chief from Minneapolis came out and is holding Chauvin accountable for really what can only be described as murder. So are a number of other officers, and that is, at least in my lifetime, that is pretty much unheard of. Senior leadership in a police force willing to say in public, on record, that what you did violated basically policing procedures and was a violation of someone's civil rights. So I'm not saying this is a reckoning, but I think, thank God for iPhones and the fact that we can police the police. And we need to hold police officers accountable.
And we saw that sorry, go ahead, Karen. But it also makes you wonder, too, about when the instances when there weren't a cell phone, and also the instances when there aren't police involved. Let's say, we've seen instances of people calling police on folks. It's civilians that are doing it, feeling threatened. What was it in New York? The man who had a dog in the park. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was trying to watch a bird.
The birder, right? The Karens of the world, right? Your point is very well taken. If this was not filmed, we would not be having this story. It would be about a large Black man that was under the influence, that floated a counterfeit bill, and it was completely justified. So, this is a very good thing. I think that having police cameras, I think having civilians film the police is the start of changing a culture which historically protected, I'm not suggesting all police officers fall in this category, but you don't need many bad apples, basically, to completely taint the barrel. And I think this is at least the start, I hope, of rethinking our policing and the role that police have in various communities.
And Dr. Smith, would you say then, is it also a matter of, talking to people, to someone who doesn't look like you? Like, how do you break down that fear? For example, even as simple as a woman walking down the street, if she sees a Black person, grabs her purse, versus if it was a white person, oh, it's fine. How do you even begin to knock that down?
I think education plays a large role, and also I don't want to ever overemphasize the importance of cameras, because I grew up in the age of Rodney King, where we watched, on tape someone get beaten. So oftentimes, again, we shift away from the actual problem and pay attention more to the technology and things like that. But I think education plays a major role. And if people are educated about the history of criminality and attacks and demeaning of bodies, then they'll see that the people who you should be fearful of historically have not been black men when it comes to kidnapping people and, you know, demeaning people's bodies in mass. It's really a result of how we got here, other people doing that to us. So it's really tragically ironic that the very people who are kidnapped and demeaned to the greatest extent in human history, labeled property, are the ones that are now being targeted as the primary, you know, violent purveyors and kidnappers in the world. It's just a real sign of miseducation about people's own history in America.
Well,
I would also add to Dr. Smith's comment that, you know, I grew up with Rodney King also, and that was seen as a one-off. There was a one video, and they deconstructed it frame by frame to say that it was justified and that all the hits were justified. What's now is just the sheer number that we're seeing of people, the sheer number. You can't ignore it, right? Rodney King's a one-off. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Now we have dozens of videos every month of something as an egregious violation of some civil rights. And that, I think, is the start where you have to have the conversation. No person of conscience can look at that video for 9 minutes and 30 seconds and say that this was acceptable, that this wasn't excessive force. So I really do think the technology is going to work in our favor to make it a more just society.
Perspective plays a major part. When we say one-off, for us, Rodney King was Eleanor Bumpurs, you know, personified. For us, Rodney King was Emmett Till. For us, Rodney King was finally they'll see it. For us, it was the last thing.
That's the way culture has defined it. I mean, I don't get to control the media, but that was what the media did. The media can't sweep under the rug, you know, video after video after video after video. That's called a pattern, right? That's
well, certain cultures.
You can't sweep it away.
I'd say certain cultures, because in my culture, it was always understood that this was not a one-off. This was, they might finally wake up and see what we've been trying to tell them, back to the lived experience, for hundreds of years.
Yeah, but
there's one thing within a certain community,
yes,
and how other people view it. I think that's what's being said. One community knows too well because it's your community versus how it's being broadcast or put out there to others to perceive.
If I can add one historical point. People say this about cameras, but we have to remember that people were lynched in public by the thousands. Bodies were hanging in the town square every morning for weeks, for generations. Let's not pretend that people didn't see this and didn't know.
Of them. They had postcards of them.
So they knew. Yeah, so it wasn't a one-off, and they knew.
Yeah, but now you can't fake it anymore. That's what I'm saying.
It is such an important discussion that unfortunately we're going to continue to have for a long, long time. I think one of the takeaways for all of us is in our own lives outside of the police. How am I? What are my reflections? What do I think? And how we can all have different thoughts about our community. And I just wanted to thank you.
Yes, and Dr. Smith, you mentioned education. You have to want to be educated. And Dr. Gallagher, you said it's about having those conversations, and we're having those conversations. We hope that you learned something from this.
You. And hello to my 8 o'clock class at LaSalle.
All right, thank you to both of you. We appreciate it. Dr. Aaron Smith and Dr. Charles Gallagher.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break.